Good evening. It is January 13th, 2026. Special meeting of the City Council of Louisville, Colorado. Can we get a roll call vote?
Mayor Lay,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton,
Here.
Council Member Dickinson, Council Member Cooperman,
Here.
Council Member Fahey,
Here.
Council Member Kern,
Here.
Council Member Hefner.
Here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. We are. What was just on? Okay, who has I just need to know who has the control tonight. Who has the control mic? We have one mic and it changes from time to time, but that one mic can turn off all the others. So I just, need to know that kind of for the meeting. So tonight we're going to talk about the comprehensive plan. I have just a couple of remarks at the beginning of this, and then we'll have a staff presentation, and we'll have council discussion. We'll have public comments, and then probably a little bit of actually, we'll probably do the council discussion after the public comments, but I appreciate everybody's being here first because this is a big deal. We do this about once every 10 years, looking out over the future and trying to figure out what Louisville should look like based on what the community is saying, and the community is saying a variety of different things, and we'll hear some of that tonight. We are in the home stretch of this process, which started in many ways with housing plan development and has moved through now a draft and the current one that's in front of us tonight. We had a lot of discussion last summer, which went into the current draft and had good public comments. We've had astonishingly good public engagement on this process from the very beginning. And I'm very proud of our community for that. I'm very proud of the work that the council has done. I'm very proud of the work that the staff has done. I'm very proud of the work that the Louisville Planning Commission has done. Just absolutely top drawer work all the way. Very thoughtful work, and we hope to bring it in and ultimately get to a place where we have a plan that we can all be proud about, at least from the process standpoint. And I think the final thing I'd say is we know that not everybody is going to agree with every piece of the plan as it's currently written or finally written. But I think all of us, and I mean everyone, whether agree with all of it or not, care about the future of the city. That's why people have been engaged. They love the city. And that's why I love this city. And why I love serving in this job. And I bet that if I went around, most of the council members might say similar things, or at least agree with me. They might say it in a different way. They would. But anyway, I just wanted to say those things. I'll have some more comments to make before we kind of go into council discussion. but I wanted to put that out there. I think we're all about trying to have a good, solid, civil, good discussion tonight. I think we'll have that with the public. I have highest regard for and confidence in the public. We probably, I don't know that we have anybody yet online. Do we have some people online? Good. And we have some people here, and we're here to listen as council members, and we're here to feedback too. So let's get going. There's a staff presentation, as I understand it. Thank you in advance for all the work that you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So Jeff Hurt with Community Development. The purpose of tonight's discussion is to, in your packet, is to introduce what we're calling the 95% draft of the comp plan in advance of broader community information sharing. And so the level that we're at tonight, or we're requesting that we're at tonight as staff, is sort of in recognition of what you just said, Mr. Mayor, which is we're about 2 years in on this process, a lot of iterating, a lot of direction. So at this stage, our request is more sort of clarification level, major omissions. I'm certainly happy to dive into some of the policy questions. Topics I'm going to cover in the presentation are just a reminder of what the comp plan is and isn't for council and others in the room. A quick process recap of where we've been and how we got here. We'd like to orient you to the document itself in terms of how it's structured and how it works. We'd like to do a bit of a deeper dive on the future land use framework itself of the plan. We're not going to get into all the substance of the plan. There's so much, but the future land use framework warranted a deeper dive. So we'll do that as it relates to the growth estimates and some of the implications around that. One of the key themes for the presentation is to kind of emphasize and reemphasize that this is really part of a sort of a continuum of different city efforts. There's a lot that is planned to begin immediately after the plan to sort of continue the progress. Sort of this overarching goal of ensuring we maintain our high level of services as a city and quality of life. And certainly we'll talk about next steps. So a reminder of what the comp plan is and isn't. This is, again, a policy document. This is not regulatory. So this is a high level vision document, a community-driven vision that has a 20-year horizon, so very long term. We update it every 10 years. It is an update to our 2013 comp plan. Again, not zoning, not regulations, not a prescriptive sort of budget document or anything like that. Policy guidance for the community. Context of where council has been on this process. We've met many times. I forget the exact count, but last met in the summer where we had a pretty deep dive review of an early draft. We did a really deep dive in the future land use framework, specifically sort of area by area. This draft does reflect that direction. That's before you tonight. As far as the process to date, I'm not going to get into the details. That's described, happy to if you would like. That's described in the plan itself in detail and in the appendices, but we had really good turnout. Over 2,000 residents engaged on the project. We touched base with all of our boards and commissions as far as subject matter experts as it relates to the different goals and strategies in the plan. We had 3 community engagement phases, each sort of building off of each other. There's one more planned as an informational stage, which this is in advance of. I'll talk more about that. So we, again, wanted to emphasize sort of how to think of this as part of a continuum. There's a different way to say it if you want, trajectory. But really this comp plan is about creating that foundation for a lot of work to come to ensure we've got that good, solid foundation in terms of where and how we're growing, how we can have responsive city services for any level of growth contemplated in the plan. It is, I think, ideally and intentionally sequenced after the housing plan so we can get a sense of what those needs are and respond to them in the comp plan. We'll circle back to some of the specific follow-up that's planned for immediately after comp plan adoption. So I wanted to call your attention to a section of the plan, the sort of how to use this plan section. Depending on who you are as a council member, as a resident, as a property owner, as a developer, kind of helps guide you with how to use the plan in terms of policy guidance and the city's vision. The plan, so it's getting into the plan structure itself, just to orient you to the document. We know it's big. We try to keep it as concise as possible, but there are a few pages in there where if you just wanted like a snapshot of what the plan says, it's deliberately kind of placed into like 3 or 4 pages. This graphic is one of those pages where it shows the overall structure. Starting with the vision statement and core values, I'll recap that process briefly, but that's the high level sort of guidepost. Whereas underneath that and related to that are the actual policy statements in the plan, which are the goals and strategies. Those are not intended to be a prescriptive list. There's a lot in there. There's about 50 goals and a lot of strategies underneath them. To reiterate, not a prescriptive list of all the things the city shall do. It's a guide for us in our decision making. So that's important to emphasize. And then an action plan is a really brief, concise appendix to the plan that has that more prescriptive list of the things the city could or should be doing in the near term to implement the plan. This is just a visual of the table of contents. You can see how the plan elements are broken down by topic. Everything's kind of nested within that. So regarding the vision statement and core values, we had a lot of discussion about this, but just as a reminder, these were affirmed by City Council and Planning Commission. I think we all agree that these aren't perfect and we could wordsmith these endlessly. So we're not requesting a revamp of these, but happy to go there if you would like. As far as the sort of the meat of the plan, again, there's like a few pages in there where if you just wanted a snapshot of what it says, this is one of them also where it lists all of the different plan elements and all of the goals that live within each of the plan elements. And then kind of nested under that, to give you a visual, I know you can't read this, but to give you a visual, the plan is laid out. So each goal is stated and the specific strategies that implement that goal are listed. Again, not a prescriptive list, just really a comprehensive, extensive list of all the things we heard the city should be considering by topic. And then the action plan is really brief, 1 to 2 page appendix that lays out all the key things we as a city should do from like a strategic planning standpoint to implement the plan and ensure the vision and values are being implemented as we do more specific kind of tangible things. Not a capital improvements plan, it's a separate thing. Our intent is for this to be updated every 5 years or so. We would like to see that as our proposal every few years. That's why it's an appendix. So doing a deeper dive into the future land use framework. So this is we expect a lot of discussion about this and certainly a key component of the plan. I'll kind of walk through how that's structured so you can get a sense of how it's structured. And then we could talk a little bit about some of the substance and talk about growth estimates and things like that. So the way it's structured is the city is broken down by what we call place types or future land use categories. Again, this is not a zoning map. This is not regulatory. The structure is basically, if you see this table on the left, I know you can't read it, but that's the high level summary of all the place types, sort of the key attributes of each place type in terms of uses, scale, things like that. And so those are assigned to places on the map in the city, the future land use map. And I'll walk through briefly just an example of the specific structure of each of these place types. So this is, again, I know you can't read this as a visual. This is neighborhood center as an example. So each one of these has one page. And so one part of it is just a general description of the character of that area. Another part is a general description of the transportation network in that area, what it looks like, what the speeds are like, what the connectivity is like. And with regards to the land uses and scale, this is an important one. We had a discussion with Planning Commission about for clarification. So again, not zoning, this will play into zoning, but when it says, so it says primary land uses and supporting land uses. So what that means is kind of within that bubble on the map, within that place type, what are the predominant land uses that we see most of? That's primary. And then supporting land uses, we would see less of within that bubble in that area. So in a low density single family area, you might see duplexes occasionally, but much less so. It'd be more of a supporting land use. Again, that goes into zoning, which we're not there yet. Density and scale is pretty self-explanatory. That's an explanation of the residential dwelling units per acre and then the building heights at a high level. Development considerations are factors for us as a city to consider as like development proposals come into these place types, things for us to consider to kind of think about things more holistically. Also important to note the imagery that is in each of the place types should reflect the density and the building heights. So if you want to know what like 24 dwelling units per acre looks like, or whatever that range is, these images should be of places that are of that density, for example. Part of the future land use framework also is this opportunity areas framework, as it's called in the plan. These are the areas of the city, we talked about this with council, where we think it's clear that the most change will occur. Once we get into the future growth estimates, you'll see that based on our analysis, about 90%-ish of the future growth contemplated in this plan would be concentrated in the opportunity areas. Happy to get into that. These areas were selected, and I think we talked about this with council last summer, but they were selected for a number of reasons. One, there's a lot of vacant and underutilized land in these areas. Two, also a big one, there's already infrastructure there to serve new development and redevelopment. So it's already been planned for capacity that isn't there yet. It is also important to note, as part of our citywide community survey, a statistically valid survey that we do every couple of years, we did ask a pointed question to tie into the comp plan about redevelopment of these areas and support. And we found 80% of the folks that responded supported redeveloping these existing commercial areas that are underutilized or underperforming into mixed use or residential. So getting into the future growth estimates that are tied to the future land use framework. Again, these are estimates, not targets. A little bit of context first before we get into the numbers. A reminder of our population currently is about 20,000. I think a lot of folks know our population has actually been declining modestly in the last 5-ish years, kind of outside of Marshall Fire considerations. School enrollment has also continued to decline. It is important to note that we did closely coordinate with the school district throughout this process. They're very much in support of the idea of promoting residential growth in the city. So getting into the actual estimates here shortly, but maybe as a reminder of what these estimates are. So I think it's really important to emphasize these are not targets or goals or aspirations. This is really, not simply, but this is really just focused on what does this future land use mean in terms of a potential that could happen over the next 20 years? And how can we plan our services, our infrastructure, our systems around that as an assumption in a range? So it's important to note that it is based on the densities that are in the place types, and we could talk about the methodology if you would like. But again, it's about understanding our potential future infrastructure needs, services, facilities, and really about how do we put ourselves in position to best manage growth, incremental growth over the next 20 years. So the specific numbers that are in the plan are, reminder, our current housing unit count is about 9,000 housing units. So the analysis we did estimated that between 4,000 and 5,000 additional housing units could be built over the next 20 years if this framework were to build out. And that is broken down again, pretty heavily concentrated into the opportunity areas, about 90%. But even within those opportunity areas, it's about 75% of that is within the Red Tail Ridge and Centennial Valley area. So it's pretty concentrated based on the available land and the size of those areas. So we wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive, kind of in response to the discussion we had with the Planning Commission and some of the questions that they raised with regard to the future growth estimates as it relates to a few kind of nuanced things. First, related to our housing goals, which is kind of the clearest line, I think, but also related to economic vitality in our commercial areas and environmental sustainability. So the first sort of policy consideration as it relates to the growth estimates is a reminder of our housing plan from May 2024 has 3 really clear, explicit goals to increase residential development opportunities, expand our affordable housing stock, and diversify our housing stock. This plan very much accomplishes that as presented to you. It's a little bit more nuanced when you look at how it relates to residential growth and how that relates to economic vitality in our commercial areas. So I guess the first thing to say is we very much, and as we iterated with council in your direction, we discussed this, but very much had the plan drafted in mind as it relates to economic vitality in the sense of, when you look at the future land use map, for example, our core commercial areas, if you look at the red areas on the map, are maintained in their current state as predominantly commercial, nearly exclusively commercial. And there's a pretty sizable footprint that reflects those areas on McCaslin and South Boulder Road and downtown. The intent is to maintain those. The residential growth and the mixed use growth that's contemplated in the plan is intentionally sort of adjacent and peripheral to that to address our housing goals, but also the idea of supporting those commercial areas in terms of customers, supporting retail. Our retail base has been declining or not increasing as fast as other sectors. And so we really believe that by allowing some residential adjacent and near these commercial areas, it would strengthen them. So that's a big part of the equation. Another question that came up with Planning Commission was, how does this relate to job growth? How does housing growth relate to job growth? So that's an important nuance as well, that we have a couple slides on here. And basically what this graph shows, to kind of get to the point, is, it's hard to read, but the blue line on this graph shows over the last like 15 years what our job growth has been. And so you can see it's been going up steadily. We're well over 2 jobs for every housing unit. We can talk about that balance if you'd like, but the bottom line, the orange line, is our number of housing units, and that has remained flat. And so the issue that we'll talk about here is this divergence is an issue for a number of reasons, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. So with that divergence, where you're getting more and more jobs and less housing units, which is really the path that we're on under sort of our current land use policies, there's a few key issues. One is that this continued issue of folks that work here can't live here. So you have more jobs here, but not a proportionate amount of housing units. Less people can live here, that work here, and serve the community. And that's an affordability issue as well as a supply issue in housing. Commute distances change, which ties to vehicle miles traveled, which is a huge tie to environmental sustainability goals. So more and more people commuting into Louisville using regional roads means that more vehicle miles traveled. That directly ties to greenhouse gas emission issues, air quality issues, things of that nature. So there is a sustainability component that ties into this. And then workforce hiring challenges. This is something that we had discussions with folks, employers in the beginning of this process, in terms of sort of clarifying that hiring people can be really challenging, whether it's service industry folks, or if we're talking about teachers, firefighters, police officers. If they can't afford to live nearby, that's a challenge to recruit and retain employees. And then the last thing on future growth, we wanted to say just a few clarifications as we think about this. So one, again, a reminder, this is a 20-year horizon. And from our perspective and the way the plan is drafted or intended to be drafted, there's a framework to allow for really balanced decision-making on development. So, the future land use map is like a really tangible thing you can look at. But I think it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of peripheral related goals and policies that are intended to be evaluated sort of on balance, that really provide good, I think, support for us to evaluate development and sort of manage change incrementally. We believe that's the case. We could certainly look for opportunities to strengthen that approach. Another thing to mention is, again, the action items that we'll talk about in the next slide here. We've got a lot of things teed up to sort of immediately start addressing to ensure there's continuity with a lot of these policies and this vision. And also important to note, the comp plan can be amended at any time. The code says we have to do it every 10 years, but there's nothing saying we can't do it in a year or two if we feel we need to fine tune it or something isn't working. So as far as the follow-up, and I think I've just got a few slides left here, but as far as the follow-through, just wanted to clarify the things that are currently teed up and kind of on the books to immediately start after the comp plan is adopted. One is the development code update. I'll touch on that a little bit more in the next slide. Another important one is we are budgeted, and I'm currently working on an RFP to update our development impact fees. So that's a really important tool that we have to ensure that as growth occurs, the fees that we're collecting are aligned and sort of calibrated with our needs as far as transportation, parks, open space, library, et cetera. We're also looking at updating our public land dedication requirements. Most folks are aware of the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails plan that's underway. That's at a good place in its process to start to integrate what's coming out of the comprehensive plan into that effort. And then utility system plan updates are planned for, we've been closely working with those folks to sort of immediately update that plan and the assumptions that are going into it to be responsive to this plan. Development code update, I won't spend much time on it unless you'd like to, but we do have a fairly robust RFP we're about to share with you that shows a pretty comprehensive update to all of our systems and our code and our design standards to, again, immediately follow the comp plan. We think it's well teed up for that. Did just want to call your attention to, we're not going into too much substance outside of land use, but there is a pretty robust transportation section of the plan. And there's a map in there that calls for future potential connections for us to evaluate. And so I think important to note there that We have the 2019 transportation plan that continues to be our guiding transportation document. This is intended to build off that and integrate with that. So it's really a kind of a dust off of that plan and at a much higher level. Key differences from the 2013 plan. So obviously an update of our community values and our vision statement. Times have changed. There's a much stronger emphasis on housing affordability, diversity, sustainability, resilience, social equity. Those are more sort of top of mind now, so they're in the plan. The future land use framework is a big part of the change, where the previous plan contemplated very little residential growth and keeping commercial areas mostly commercial. This plan looks at things differently and looks for more mixed use and residential opportunities in some of those areas. Planning Commission input. So we just met with them on Thursday night. We got them comments too as soon as we could, but at a high level, they generally express support for the plan as drafted, with a lot of discussion, sort of heavy emphasis on the importance of managed growth. So we dove into the numbers and the future growth estimates, which, you know, some of them expressed the idea of, well, I had some initial concern, but once we had this discussion and once we kind of looked into the details, we see the opportunity for more managed incremental growth. So there's sort of support through that lens over the 20-year horizon. And then there's some other specific comments that maybe I won't go through here, happy to, but things that can be added to the plan before we release it to the public, more broadly to the public, things related to Xcel Energy, fresh off of our power outage, things more top of mind, things like that. So there's a few others happy to talk about as well. Our next steps are, we have a community informational open house scheduled for Wednesday, January 28th at the Simon here on Main Street. So we're sending out noticing for that, encouraging folks to attend. The Planning Commission public hearing to consider adoption is scheduled for February 26th, and the council adoption hearing is scheduled for March 17th. And those, again, will be additional opportunities for public input and review of the plan. And that concludes my presentation. These are the questions that are in the packet to guide the discussion.
Thank you very much. What we'll start with is council comments, but questions about the presentation, plan, as people have any questions, and then we'll start with public comment. Yes, Councilmember Hefner.
I know Rob and I exchanged an email about this earlier, but if you could just share with everyone the thoughts on the trail connection that we emailed about. I've been hearing a lot of public comments about that.
Yeah, so there was a public comment about a connection between Red Tail Ridge along the Goodhue Ditch connecting to Coal Creek Trail System. So as the Red Tail Ridge development was going in, that was or was being approved, there were some discussions about a potential trail connection from Red Tail Ridge along Goodhue Ditch. So as you know, we acquired several properties around Paradise Lane, which actually provides a connection into other public open space and agricultural lands. And so there's no specific plans, and these are jointly owned lands. We have had some discussions with county staff preliminarily about a potential trail connection, but absolutely, nothing in the works or anything. So it provides a really great off-street connection to have a regional trail through those ag and open space lands getting into Coal Creek. A big question about how do we connect Red Tail Ridge to the core of the city and downtown? There are other options for sidewalks and trails, but this was thought of as a potential, commuter, recreational, regional trail that could be considered going through the Paradise Lane properties, following the ditch, and ultimately connecting to the Coal Creek Trail system. It would have to cross Dillon Road. There is one barrier there. So there have been quite a few staff level discussions, and so it was added to the plan for those considerations.
And would it be fair to say that at this point it's essentially conceptual and subject to refinement, including in the Trails Master Plan and sort of future?
Yes, yeah.
What's the level of abstraction here, I guess?
Yeah. It is conceptual. I guess I would describe it as this could be considered over the life of this plan as a potential trail connection. So if it made sense from the city level, the community level, the county level as well, because they do have joint ownership of some of this land. So there's a lot of pieces that would have to fall into place and consideration between the county and the city and the community about making that connection.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Would it be appropriate to make a comment about that while it's being discussed? Okay, sure. I guess I'm wondering, would it be possible to sort of, on the map that's in the plan, to kind of reflect that indefiniteness of the trail to a little bit more extent? Like there would, like, you know, it'd be nice to have a connection here, but we're not quite sure where, as opposed to showing a rather definite path for it.
So I think if council would like, we could kind of create a different type of line typology or footnotes specifically for that, if council wanted that for that trail.
Councilmember Kern.
Just a follow-up question on that. So is one of the ideas that there is an advantage to following the Good Hue ditch, and maybe there's with helping us do ditch maintenance as well? I mean, just from the perspective we're citywide, we have a concern with recovering resiliency and mitigating against wildfire. The ditches are a very major concern for the community. And is that something that was part of the consideration, or?
Not specifically. I think, you know, the ditch maintenance is going to be done by the ditch company, and they don't need this trail to access and maintain the ditch. It really doesn't enhance access for maintenance purposes.
I just wasn't sure if maybe if there was like public access to that area, and so things were being monitored by the residents, the community members, that it might be something that's activated, or we can help it get activated more quickly and easily if that trail was there. I just thought if there's layers to reasons why we're proposing a trail going one location versus another.
Right. So trails often follow things like ditches. It's very common. You know, the topography often works, and you know, to follow a ditch, and you know, it provides a nice kind of wayfinding for a potential trail through that area versus just a straight line through. So you do see, you know, ditches and creeks often having adjoining trails, and there's things to consider about that, right? Because these are also sometimes wildlife areas and things which we've had comments about. So there's pros and cons to trails following riparian corridors and ditches, just from an amenity versus ecological standpoint. But I'm not aware of any like ditch maintenance or fire resiliency benefits specifically from it.
So thank you. I'm looking forward to this being part of a robust PROST discussion versus the comp plan discussion. So thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. So along those lines, but pulling it up a little bit more, help me to understand, you know, you listed some of the additional documents that will help to guide the decision-making process in concert with the comp plan, right? Trails, pros, like all these things. How is the decision made as to how much detail is appropriate for comp versus just referencing those other documents? Help me wrap my brain around that part. And I think this is an example of that, right? You could use concretely.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I think the comprehensive plan is kind of the highest level policy plan. So something like the PROS plan, we would intend to be more specific and action oriented. You know, the comp plan, like looking at transportation changes for like previous transportation plans and comprehensive plans, for example, you know, called for a protected crossing on the power line trail on Dillon Road, for example. So we've contemplated that off and on over the years. It's been on many plans for various reasons. We haven't implemented it, but it's just, hey, maybe you might want to consider that. I would expect that the PROST plan and the trail plan we would expect to be more actionable, that you would be buying off on those improvements and putting those into CIPs. So I would say the comp plan's like, here's kind of a big idea of different transportation improvements. If they're further reinforced by the Prost and the Trails plan, then maybe that makes it in, that further reinforces it and puts it into a CIP. I think if we overthink it and say it has to be here and it has to be here in order to get into here, that also could inhibit more creative options, right? So if there's something not in the Prost plan, but it's in the comp plan or just another idea, council may want to have the opportunity to put that in a CIP. So I think, having it in this plan, again, isn't prescriptive that we shall do it. And the Prost plan's probably more prescriptive, but not 100% prescriptive because you still all have to approve it in a CIP.
Yeah, let me see who else. Any questions? All right. Do you have a follow-up? Because I'm trying to make sure we kind of keep focused. Go ahead.
I had just a couple little questions about opportunity areas and the future land use map. So one of them is at the intersection of Dillon and 96th. There's that little bit included in the Red Tail Ridge opportunity area on the northeast corner.
I think that got taken out because it wasn't contiguous.
Yeah, it's not contiguous. That's right. I thought it was.
As it doesn't. The opportunity area for Red Tail Ridge is pretty specific to Red Tail Ridge, and so there's policies dialed to it. So it is not as an opportunity area.
Yeah. So my question was, well, I don't know. I thought it was still in the map, but there's basically nothing said about that particular lot, as far as I could tell, and I was just curious why that might be, or if we're thinking about putting in some statement or something about that lot.
No, I mean it has a place type assignment, which is as granular as any other lot in the city. But the plan doesn't really have sort of parcel specific policies, but open to looking at it a different way. Yeah.
I would just say that we did distinguish that parcel from the employment designation to the neighborhood center designation. It's just not within the opportunity area, kind of recognizing some of council's feedback from June and July about that potentially being an area of change, because that would be a somewhat of a change from current anticipated land use for that parcel.
Okay. And then in the South Boulder Road opportunity area, at least on the map, there's like a little exclusion, like where the King Soopers gas station is. If you look at the map, like at least the bounds around the opportunity area.
I see an inclusion, a little bump up.
Well, maybe it's just an error.
There could always be a little error in there.
Like if you're on page 56, maybe it's just an error. On page,
I know we're not. The map you're looking at, yeah, there's an error on that map.
Okay.
The actual sort of more controlling, quote unquote, opportunity area map, which is it's part of is accurate. That one's inaccurate.
Very good.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's fine. And then could you just remind us, coming off our discussion in the summer, could you say just a word or two about the place type designation for kind of the northern tip of the Centennial Valley, like across from the police station? Sort of what the thoughts were about that designation? Yeah, that little tip.
Oh, to the corner, maybe to clarify, the southwest corner of Via Appia and McCaslin, essentially, that corner. Yeah. The question is, what's the thinking behind the? Yeah. I don't remember what was proposed in the June and July version, but I do remember a discussion about the importance of transitioning density into the adjacent neighborhood. So if it was previously neighborhood center, which would be the higher density classification, I think it got moved to a residential mix where it'd be more like a townhome type development pattern because of the proximity to the neighborhood.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
Good. Appreciate that. Let's go to public comments. I can't imagine that we have any public comments on this. Tonight, I'll preface this as I usually do with comments that speakers are limited to 3 minutes, 6 minutes if there's somebody you can point to who's willing to pool their time with you. We'd like for you to come and fill out a card, give it to the clerk. She'll read your name, come up to the podium if you would. Make sure that that little green light is on. If it's not, we'll fix that, and we'll tell you if it's not working, but you can help us with that if you see it go out. State your name and whether you're from Louisville or not, and you'll have your time. We'd ask everybody to be respectful of the comments that are being made. It's hard sometimes to come up and speak. This is a really fraught set of topics and policies. Really, a lot of people have vested a lot of effort and time and passion into it. And if we could avoid the boos and hisses and cheers and so forth, I'd sure appreciate it. I think everybody would. So with that in mind, let's get going.
First up is Andy Johnson, polling time with Michelle Frieswick Johnson, followed by Catherine Smith.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, Council. My name's Andy Johnson. I am a Louisville resident. I'm also a business owner in Louisville. I'm here to speak in strong support of the 95% draft of the comprehensive plan update. I want to express my sincere enthusiasm for this document. This update is a community-led effort, a true reflection of all of us who live in Louisville. I have participated in nearly all the public engagement offerings over the past 2 years, which reached over 2,000 residents, which is astounding. And I have been deeply impressed by how seriously city staff has included public comment in a meaningful way. To say this draft is merely good is selling it short. It is outstanding. I want to specifically thank City Manager Diana Langley, Jeff Hurt, Rob Zuccaro, and the entire participating staff. Jeff, in particular, has authored a document that is brave and forward-thinking. For years, I have viewed comprehensive plans as the foundation upon which exclusionary zoning rests. Historically, Louisville's plans have been weak and ineffective at answering hard questions about our future. This draft represents a fundamental mental shift. It is 90%, 95% amazing, and 100% a step in the right direction toward making a system less bad and more collaborative. However, we must be clear-eyed about what this document is and what it is not. The comprehensive plan is a strategic guidebook for policy, priorities, and a reflection of our values. It is not a prescriptive to-do list to achieve a specific population benchmark, nor is it a strategy for unchecked growth. I want to speak pointedly to the NIMBY groups and those who oppose any growth. These groups often follow a specific playbook of opposition, like the ones outlined in Evan Fedor's 1999 book, Bigger Not Better, that distracts and misrepresents intent to serve a goal of total limitation. We see these tactics locally. Framing a growth machine. They attempt to point any progress as a small minority capturing benefits at the public's expense. The cost fallacy. They demand full cost accounting as a way to say no until every possible infrastructure cent pencils out, ignoring that development in Louisville already pays its way. In fact, permit and impact fees for a single home can reach $140,000 before a shovel even hits the ground. Fees that already rival highest in the region. Narrative shifting. They argue that any growth equals an equal measure of lowered quality of life. This is not only obtuse, it is intentionally misleading. A no growth or significantly limited growth policy is exclusionary by nature and represents a path towards protectionism. We cannot allow our city to be governed by a philosophy of fear or obstruction. Stagnation is the real threat to Louisville's future, not the incremental growth proposed in this plan. While the draft is excellent, I have several technical recommendations to ensure it is thorough and effective as possible. Modernize land and density calculations. I believe we must remove density restrictions, units per acre, from the RLD, residential low density, and RMX, residential mixed place types. Under current draft language, an 8 unit per acre density calculation equates to a minimum lot size of approximately 5,500 square feet. The mathematical requirement simply does not work for small size lots or fee simple attached single family units. To fix this, we should strike the word limited from these descriptions and explicitly add single family detached 2 unit attached duplex to the primary land uses. This prepares our code for the necessary removal of minimum lot size restrictions and allows for more flexible, diverse housing options. Create a path for incremental by right housing. The city should establish an easy by right path for duplex conversions of existing homes in all residential districts. This type of incremental change is a powerful tool. It provides a significantly more affordable entry point into Louisville than a new detached home. More importantly, it achieves this with almost zero impact on the physical scale or character of our existing neighborhoods. Revitalize downtown and key corridors. It is time to repeal and replace McCaslin Boulevard and South Boulder small area plans. Furthermore, the downtown design handbook must be completely redone. At nearly 30 years old, the current handbook is tired and tends to generate derivative architecture. It limits downtown capacity to support meaningful modern spaces. Modern with a lowercase m, not a uppercase m.
Andy, that is your time.
6 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Next up is Catherine Smith, followed by Regina Rice.
Can I close the laptop? Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Smith. I live in Ward 3. And it's a nice contrast, me and the prior speaker. I am one of the people who supports growth, but I'm supporting it at a smaller scale than what is presented in the comp plan. And I am in favor of reasonable and responsible growth. I have questions that I don't think are answered by the comprehensive plan, and I'd like to see them answered by council or the planning staff. And what I'm not seeing is an explanation as to why this extraordinary level of growth is appropriate for the city. I don't understand how we benefit. I don't understand what the growth brings us that we need. I am a strong advocate for affordable housing. I don't think the plan gets us there. Building more high-end housing doesn't bring us affordable housing. and isn't going to bring the existing housing stock down to an affordable price. Some things I care about that I think are related to resilience that I haven't heard anyone talk about are, can we bury the power lines? It's my understanding we're not burying the power lines at Red Tail. I think it has economic implications, not just fire safety implications. I think having a reliable source of power during wind events is actually important for the city. And along those lines, if we're going to grow the city, we have to deal with evacuation issues. I was happy to hear this discussion about the Goodhue Ditch Trail connection. I would still advocate that it is reviewed in the same way that all other trail connections are reviewed. And then finally, I ask you, please don't overlook the details at the end of the letter that the Louisville Open Space Advocates sent in, because I think those suggested edits will make a substantive improvement in the management of our open spaces. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Catherine.
Next up is Regina Rice, followed by Kristen Dean.
I'm Regina Rice. I live in Louisville, been here for over 30 years. I just want to make sure that any comprehensive plan takes into account our current climate crisis. As I mentioned in the Ward 3 meeting, the big thing for me is utilizing our water and understanding that from everything I see and hear, we're all running out of water. All you have to do is look at the Hoover Dam, the problems with the Colorado River. So even though I've been told that Louisville has adequate water resources, I think we should be conservative. I don't think we should take that for granted. And I think we should make sure that anything we do in the comprehensive plan takes into account what is the long-term goal and how are we going to utilize our water going forward, and make sure that we conserve now and put off as long as possible what I think is probably inevitable severe water restrictions. So I just would like to make sure that we keep that in the forefront with any growth plans. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina.
Hi, I'm Kristen Dean. Thank you, everyone, for all of your work, especially staff. This is a heavy, heavy lift. I am a 12-year resident of Louisville. I actually spent 2 years serving as a principal planner for this city. I started with the city just after the last comprehensive plan was adopted. And at that time, I was quite dismayed at the lack of opportunity for residential growth in this city. So I'm very excited to see how far we've come and what we're going to be able to accomplish in a very well-planned and thoughtful approach to future development. So I'm here to speak in support of the comprehensive plan. I'm here to speak in support of the growth opportunities, especially for residential. I live near Centennial Valley. I welcome the change. I welcome more people to this community. This growth means we have more people that can be integrated into the fabric of our community. We can have more children in our schools. We can have people that live here and support our local businesses, bring new businesses here, and really help us evolve and grow into the future and not remain in the stagnant place that we have been. I love the pickleball facility. I don't play pickleball, but I love relish. I'm really happy that that came forward. So thank you for that. That's the kind of growth that we really can start to experience and see more of. I really support high density growth around our transit nodes, mixed use development around our transit nodes, walkability. I support flexibility as we go forward. So with the next steps of looking at your revisions to your regulatory framework and the development code changes, I recommend that you look for opportunities to streamline the development review process, allow for certainty in that process, an efficient development review process, allow developers to come forward with you early and often to share their visions and receive your feedback so that their investment in the community comes through to fruition. It's very expensive to just plan for future development, much less build the actual infrastructure. And so creating the opportunities where the vision can be shared and evolve together will really help give developers the certainty that they need to continue to invest here. So I echo all of Andy Johnson's comments as well. And thank you. And I'm excited to see everything move forward.
Thank you, Kristen.
Next up is Billy Martins, followed by Tamar Krantz.
I'm Billy Mertens. I live in Louisville. Didn't start. 3 minutes. Anyway, it took me 2 minutes to get out of my neighborhood the other day. I timed it. I timed pretty much everything. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how the growth goes because it's going to go. No matter how much you guys, some of you might want to fight it. I'm here partly to gather notes for one of my lectures later on. I teach public choice economics at CU, along with econometrics. So as it goes, I would like to see the impact fees that we're hopefully collecting, right? Actually make some changes in infrastructure as we go. I'd like to see it now. I'd like to see what happened to the impact fees over the last several years. I can't get out of my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, it's a mess. When we first started rebuilding, everything was really tight. If we had dirt on our sidewalk, it had to be swept up or they would shut us down, right? Now there's mud, there's glass in the street. Can't get a hold of people at city council, not city council, at the city. And it's not the staff's fault. Understaffed, we don't have the infrastructure, right? Twisted my ankle in a hole that verifiably the city created over a year ago. I can't get a response at all. And I don't think it's the staff's problem. It just aren't enough, right? There are a lot of holes all over the city. I do get out of my neighborhood and then I have to drive on a tough road. And then the rec center it's impossible to get a machine unless I go in the middle of the day occasionally and I can actually get into the pool. I would just like to see some of that actually taken care of before some of this growth, right? Just show me the impact fees are being collected. Show me that somebody on the corner isn't saying, oh, this house is going to be an $800,000 house, even though it's a $2 million house. And so the fees are under collected, right? There aren't enough people to keep on it anymore. And I would like to see that happen first. Build the infrastructure, do a little bit, and then grow. Build some more and then grow. Right? We're way under. Yeah, either the rules changed vastly in terms of setbacks or they're just being missed. So the infrastructure overall isn't there right now. And I know you plan on it and you've got the statistically valid surveys, but I show these things to, guys I run with or something and they're like, what survey? Oh, is that big thing that came out? I said, yeah, did you scroll down to the different growth options? I only saw 3. No, you had to scroll down to others. There's selection bias. I teach this. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Billy.
Thanks for encouraging a good discussion. Just first, I want to say I really appreciated Commissioner Hoffner bringing up that question about the trail. I don't know a lot about it, but I do believe that we shouldn't put trails directly through open space. And just in general, it's not a good idea for protection of wildlife and protection of ecosystems. So if you guys could consider Commissioner Hooverman's idea of making it more clear, or I should say less clear in the comprehensive plan, to show that it's just a concept and not a definitive idea, I think that would be appreciated, especially if we really haven't worked through with the county and looked at the IGA and see how that plan would go. I think putting it so definitively in the comp plan is a bad idea. But I really want to say something that I feel so strongly about, and that's the growth. I know it sounds like we're talking about the growth people and the no growth people, and I feel a little called out in one of the previous comments, but I just feel like this comp plan is asking for a huge amount of residential growth. We're talking about bringing our town of 19,000 people to about 33,000 people over the next 20 years. And we keep repeating that there's 20,000 people, there's 2,000 people who participated in the open houses, but we were never asked this question: how much growth do we want? There was one question in the winter of 2024 open house and the survey that asked which growth scenarios we wanted. My understanding is that you don't believe that it's statistically valid, but in that one question, which is the only one that we were asked regarding how much growth we wanted to see, the majority of people wanted to see the stay the course scenario, which represented about 11% growth. So I know that this is a 95% draft, but I really just hope you'll put that question forward when you do the open house and ask for input and not just an information session. And then I just wanted to say something about environmental sustainability. That's something that I care about a lot. And I keep hearing that more housing is more environmentally sustainable. I just want to give you guys a couple of reasons why it may not be. We live in this area. It's painful to hear that doubling our population is going to have an environmental sustainability benefits. When we bring more concrete, we have more runoff pollution, we have more water use in an area that's experiencing drought. There's less urban wildlife. We live in the wildland-urban interface. And unlike Denver, we live here because we love the diversity of wildlife that lives here too. There's active raptor nests. Bobcats are very popular. When we have more people and more cars and more traffic and more idling, we'll have worsening air pollution in an area that's already designated as severe noncompliance for ozone by the EPA. I just wanted to say that there's other ways of dealing with the in-commuting problem. I understand that we have only 4% of people live here and work here at the same time. We have a large amount of people that out-commute. We should consider van pulling, eco passes. We should consider
Tamar, that is your time.
Parking fees and a lot of other solutions in addition to more housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar.
Next up is Cindy Bedell.
Hi, I'm Cindy Bedell. I live in Ward 2, Louisville. This is honestly a shocking comprehensive plan for Louisville. Why? How will this amount of growth benefit the residents of Louisville? Who's benefiting from this plan? Certainly not the residents. It's a plan for massive, completely unprecedented growth. Up to 2/3 more people in Louisville, double or more what was outlined in the aggressive Louisville housing plan. What would the impact be of adding 9,389 to 13,511 more people to a town of 19,889? If implemented, I believe it will fundamentally forever change the unique small town community quality of life we enjoy and threaten city finances. The plan proposes the addition of 4,100 to 5,900 housing units in a town of about 8,826 current housing units. Housing does not pay its own way. How will the city pay for the infrastructure expenses such as police, water treatment facilities, roads, library, parks, rec and open space, fire department caused by such growth? As a past planning commissioner member stated, the quickest way to reduce quality of life is to spend more time sitting in traffic. During the Marshall fire evacuation, it took us over an hour to travel a few blocks to South Boulder Road. Traffic was completely gridlocked. The person in the car behind me and myself were planning to leave our cars and make a run for it if we saw flames. How would adding this many more cars, houses, and vehicles impact safe evacuation in another natural disaster? This amount of growth will significantly crowd our rec center, where people are already fighting over lap lanes, yoga classes are full, and cause such a burden on parks and open space that maintenance costs will go way up, the visitor experience will be degraded, and the trails and spaces will be pummeled with overuse. Right now, there's polite conflict on the trails between walkers, dog walkers, bicyclists, but imagine doubling that and what could happen. Live work is a fallacy right up there with the urban myth that people who live in dense housing near transit centers won't drive. Are they going to take the bus to take their kids to daycare, go to work, stop by the doctor's office, bring down home a 4x6 piece of wood from Home Depot on the bus, go grocery shopping? Of course not. Would you? If you look at live work stats, very few people happen to live near where they live, work near where they live. People choose to live in Louisville due to quality of life. We should do some more things like preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, increase our affordable housing stock, institute creative affordable housing programming. But what we should not do is approve this plan. It needs to have the residential growth be reduced to reasonable and sustainable growth. So just send it back for downsizing. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Let's bring back to council. I guess where I want to start, just to kind of frame this a bit, is first of all, thank you to all the people who have spoken tonight very eloquently to the points that they're making. We appreciate that. We are listening. We have listened. We will listen to the next set of public input discussions, which will happen, I think, on the 28th of January. So thanks about that. I think the second thing I wanted to say is that I'm clearly hearing a few things. One is concerns about growth and the extent of it. One of the things I'm hearing is that somehow this comprehensive plan may change the character of Louisville more than current Louisville residents are comfortable with. Another theme certainly is a concern about environmental sustainability and close concerns about, or kind of adjacent concerns about effects on open space. I've also heard enthusiasm for controlled growth. I think that's something that both folks who don't like the plan as much and the folks that do like the plan at least share as a value. I think that's good common ground. I think there's the folks who've spoken in favor of this have recognized, I think everybody's recognized the shift from no residential growth to significant residential growth, or at least the possibility of significant residential growth, because I think that's undeniable. And I would go so far as to say that was intended by council when we've made our suggestions last summer. So those are a few of the comments that I've heard. And I hope that council will, in this discussion, speak to some of those because I think the people deserve it. I think that these comments are reflective of other comments that we've heard in the course of the public engagement and other folks who've sent questions in. So I think that's important to discuss. I think a couple of other points. One, I think I want myself in moderating this to be getting our focus or keeping our focus up high at a policy level. I think everybody knows that we're not here to wordsmith this document. And most of the comments, frankly, are about policy points, which I really appreciated from the public. I think we can do the same. I think we owe it to staff to cover the questions that they have asked us. And I just for purposes of focusing on that for a minute, it would probably be good to have that slide up so everybody remembers this. But is the plan clear and usable as a long-range policy guide, and are there areas where clarity can be improved? Second, does future land use framework appropriately direct potential change to the right locations? And third, are there any major policy gaps or omissions in the draft plan that should be addressed before broad community information sharing? All hefty lifts. So I think with those points in mind, I'd like to, maybe if we can, focus a bit on some of the things that we've heard from the public, and then talk specifically about the staff questions. And people have, responses to some things that we heard, some of these themes that I've outlined. I think that's worth talking about. And then I want to focus on the staff questions. And we don't need to spend a lot of time on these. We can spend whatever time you want. And if there are other thoughts about how we should do the discussion, I'm glad to hear them. Maybe right now I'll pause and just ask if people are comfortable with that sort of framework. Okay, I see some nods. I see some not necessarily nods, but not disagreement. But first of all, are there comments about some of the big themes that we've heard tonight? And what I'd like to, one other thing, just as a process matter, I'd really like folks to focus their comments so they're speaking, if possible, once, and then commenting on others' comments as opposed to a lot of different. So it mostly is an efficiency perspective. But anyway, how much I'm going to be able to drive that, I'm not sure, but I'm encouraging that. Go ahead, Councilmember Hafner.
Thank you for the helpful framing. I'm going to be selective in which of the public comments I respond to, but take that just as the things I care the most about. First and foremost, I agree that staff has done an extraordinary job, especially Jeff, in preparing this particular version, which I think is a big step forward from the last version we saw. And I will be responding with various positive things when we get to the point where we answer these questions, but just wanted to amplify the public support for the work that staff has done to get us to this 95% point. I certainly have spent a lot of time hearing and talking to folks who think this is too much growth or too many new people for Louisville, and certainly have heard the comment about what if anything does that do for those of us who already live here. And I think that's a fair point. The way I look at it is there's all sorts of people who don't live here and can't live here under the circumstances we have now. And my hope is that some of them incrementally into the future will be able to come here and enjoy this special place and not have to go farther and farther onto the Eastern Plains to find a place where it's affordable to live. And for me, that answers at least some of the sustainability questions as well, that all else being equal, we'd rather not have people driving in from an hour east to get to the Front Range. If there are development opportunities here where we could put a condo or have an ADU or whatever the case may be, where somebody can join our community and contribute to it in the many ways that people do. I do think the sort of phasing and staging and details of the land use code rewrite are going to be important in sort of thinking about how do we get the kinds of development that we're envisioning in the plan. But to me, that's a reason to do it, not a reason not to do it. The other particular comments I wanted to respond to are Andy Johnson's comments about the residential low density and the mixed use zone districts, and just trying to think about how we can write those in a way to be more flexible with respect to housing types and whether that's duplexes or other things. I think our housing plan has some aspirational language in that regard that might make sense to try and bring in, especially to that yellow category, the RLD category, that does cover quite a substantial portion of our existing housing stock. Certainly heard the comments on the Goodhue ditch. I thought Josh's suggestion makes a lot of sense on that, some sort of clarifying footnote or some such, just to make clear that that's a concept, not a final plan by any stretch. And jumping back to Andy Johnson, I share his desire to update the small area plans and downtown design handbook, as well as the commercial and industrial design guidelines, which I think was on the list of work plan items to do is it near term or medium term? I forget.
As part of the whole development code update that you'll see an RFP soon on, that's in that scope. So it would be near term in the starting this year.
Great.
And I would just mention the small area plans, we consider extension of the 2013 comprehensive plan. This document would replace the small area plans once approved.
Okay. And I think that's it, other than to say it's nice to see you, Kristen. I think it's been since I was on Planning Commission.
Okay. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I do want to take the time to reiterate and compliment staff on what has been a really long process and really phenomenal engagement of the public. So the work you do in this building and all the time spent on the document and everything behind it is extraordinary, but the amount of time that the entire staff has spent engaging the public, and that goes way beyond the 4 of you in this room, 6 of you in this room. There's so much staff time. And I really appreciate the public for all the engagement that they have had. And that can be hard sometimes when you don't feel like you might win the day in what you want, but the incredible amount of public engagement is really phenomenal for policymakers. And then again, there's on your slide, but appreciate all the time the boards have put in. So 10 different boards looking at this. It's in the number of public meetings, and those boards are filled with appointed members of our community that are experts in their fields and what they do. And so having 10 different boards weighing in on this, not to mention other groups in the city, formal and informal groups that have weighed in, it's just an incredible amount of time and effort in trying to come up with something that's very difficult, right? A plan for an entire community for 20 years is not an easy thing to pull off. And then, appreciate all the colleagues on the dais, if you will, for all the listening and leading that you're all doing. And it's kind of interesting to think that every single person, all 7 of us, were elected within the last, say, 2 years and 2 months. Right. And so, we hear a lot like elections have consequences, and that's usually like a really bad thing. but elections have consequences, right? We're representatives of our community, and all of us have been elected or reelected in the last couple of years to do what our residents want us to do. And that can be hard to know sometimes what they want us to do. So all of this outreach, all these surveys, all this feedback, all this input is really helpful, I know, for me as one of those policymakers to try to take this forward. And as I was talking to someone about it today, like, this isn't my document, right? Like, this is the city's document, and I'm at least one of 7 that are considering, finalizing this over the next couple months. But it's not mine. It's not something I'm driving. It's not something I've been driving, right? We were really very much in the back seat watching this all come to us. And I think it really embodies what I've been hearing in my 6 years on council, and a long time of being guided by a comprehensive plan that we consider to be out of date, but it is our comprehensive plan, and it's pointed to a lot. And so I'm excited for a comprehensive plan that will outlive my time on council. And 7, 8 years from now, people will be pointing back to this comprehensive plan saying, well, that's what the community came together and said they wanted. You need to respect that document. So I think the presentation of this information is fantastic. It is not something you can skim. It is really dense, but each page is really readable. And so to that first question about usability and readability and understandability, it is really well presented. The language is really good. The graphics are really good. I think it's very digestible page by page. It's not really digestible in the sense that it's enormous, but as you look into it, each page is done really well. And I think it's phenomenal. My biggest overarching concern is not population growth or population density or where it is. I think all that's been done pretty well. My biggest concern is affordability and our grasp over that concept over these next 10 years. So, I don't think, if you will, a new house is going to be built for 2 years. Like, it's going to take a long time for these houses to come to fruition, or these apartment buildings or these other things. It's a long process. But when they are, I think the biggest concern I hear and agree with is, if we just get $5,000 million places, what have we done? And so where in this document, and it's a guiding document, but where in this document is someone going to look back 5 years from now and say, well, hold on, this guiding document says we want affordable housing. And so when you're coming to this zoning moment or this building moment, this PUD, does it match our comprehensive plan in its aggressive affordable housing? And I'm not sure if it does or doesn't. Like, if it, and the teeth isn't what this is supposed to necessarily have, but does it take a council person 5 years from now, when I'm definitely doing something else and not coming to these meetings? Does that council person 5 years from now read this document and say, well, the public said we want a lot of affordable housing, and can we call something out more specifically? And I'm not trying to give a number to it, but that's my biggest concern, is that a couple of years from now, some project come forward like, well, it's 12% affordable housing. I guess you can do whatever you want within the rules we have. And so what rules are we going to put in next, or where maybe it's just kind of a warning shot across our bow that as we get past the comp plan, that we are really thinking about how to get affordable housing right. And it wasn't the ballot measures that came before us previously, but voting those down did not therefore get us affordable housing, right? It didn't do the opposite. It left us where we are. And so that I think affordability is written all through this document, but that would be my one thought as we move forward to final approval is, have we cemented enough of a direction, a policy direction for future generations, that's what we want, not just housing, but specifically affordable housing, and not solely affordable housing, but certainly a lot of it. And in the interest of only speaking once, if possible, I'm just kind of looking over my notes. Yeah, I would just say my last comment is, like, this document is everything and nothing. And I think that's what's kind of hard about it, right? It is ubiquitous, it is huge and so important. And it's like, oh my God, the next 10 years, 20 years of this document. And also is nothing, right? Everything comes after this. This guides everything else, and nothing is cemented with this document. We have to use it and use it and use it. So it's kind of both. It's something we don't need to panic over. We have lots of opportunities to make decisions in these coming years, but it is also really important. And I think you guys have done a really good job. And I'm excited for January 28th as the public gets more time to digest this document. There's a lot for me to digest. I'm sure it's a lot for them to digest. And so I think January 28th will be another great opportunity for some public feedback on what we have here. But that's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, Councilmember Coop.
Thank you.
What? Oh, yeah.
Guess I'll pick up where Caleb left off. We had several comments about affordable housing, and I believe that Andy Johnson would have made a comment as well if he didn't run out of time. I feel very much the same way as Councilmember Dickinson. Maybe even more so. I feel like as currently drafted, there is not a strong enough statement in the comprehensive plan, so that, as Councilmember Dickinson was saying, a council member in 5 years' time could look back on it and say, yes, there was a clear policy direction from our community that we want a lot of affordable housing, and we need to include that in, this development that maybe we're considering. So I would like to see us find some way to make that clear in the comprehensive plan. A few thoughts that I've had, one, which I probably have put out there before, the city joined this Boulder County-wide effort to try to get 12% of all units in the county to be affordable by 2035. And I'm very glad that staff mentions that in the document. Personally, like what I would like to see is sort of that kind of goal actually driving what we're saying in the document, so that we put that first, and then we essentially ask that growth or development help us to meet that goal. Maybe that's a little bit too much to ask for at the moment, but that's how I would like to see it. Short of that, actually, Andy Johnson gave me a suggestion, which was that maybe what we could do is in our definitions or descriptions of the place types, we should just have explicit statements that we want to see affordable housing, or we want to see mixed income housing, or something in those definitions, but that's very explicit about what kind of mix of housing for different income levels we would actually like to see. And I don't know that we need to attach numbers to it, but just make it clear that that's what we're hoping to get in those different places. And then one other suggestion, in the action, I forget what it's called, the list of actions at the end. Right now, there's not listed an update to our inclusionary housing ordinance, which we've started to talk about. Maybe it's meant to be included in one of the other things listed there. But I think we could get very creative about that ordinance to help us get more affordable housing than just 12%. And so if it's, I would like to see it, I think, explicitly listed there. Yeah. A couple little things that I'll comment on. So again, Andy Johnson mentioned the idea essentially of allowing duplexes in, say, the RLD and maybe RMX designation, and Councilmember Huffner brought that up. I very much agree with that. One little question that Andy didn't get to was about the Old Town overlay. There's not really, doesn't seem like there's any mention of that or consideration of that in the comprehensive plan, and I think maybe there should be. And then maybe I'll just comment last on another set of public comments that we heard, which is about, impacts on services and infrastructure and so forth. So, I've probably made comments like this before, but I think it would have been helpful through the course of the comprehensive plan process to at least provide some sort of ballpark estimates of impacts to services and infrastructure coming from the scenarios for growth and development that we're considering. And they could be very ballpark. It could be like, we think our recreation center has this capacity. This is how much people use it. If we start adding people, and we also look at how people are being added in the communities around us that also use a recreation center, like what would we, roughly speaking, what would we expect to need in terms of recreation center facilities under a certain growth scenario? And I would guess, I don't know, but that, our Director Blackmore could provide some kind of ballpark estimate like that without too much trouble. And I think, I don't know exactly how we would use that, but I think it would at least be good to see that information, and for our residents to see that kind of information. And, we do talk about planning for those kinds of things in the document, but they just feel a little bit empty, to me at least, because we haven't done even that very basic level of analysis. So, I think maybe just to finish up, I very much agree with Councilmember Hefner's comments about the comprehensive plan in general. And, on the issue of the services we provide and the infrastructure we have, I think it is basically on council as we go forward to make sure that we are planning accordingly, so that we do continue to provide the services that we provide now, and to our new residents, and maintain the level of infrastructure that we have as well. So thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Hamilton.
Sure, I'm happy to go next. So first and foremost, thank you to staff for an excellent 95% draft. Thank you to the community for participating over the past few years and continuing to engage as we reach the finish line. It's very important that we continue to hear your thoughts and feedback on this document. My fellow council members have already addressed many of the items that I was going to speak of. Just looking at the questions, I do think that this plan is clear and usable as a long-term or long-range policy guide. At this point in time, I'll be curious to see what the remaining few say, if this would change my mind, but the current future land use work framework, I think, is targeted in the right locations. As far as any major policy gaps, we heard a few times about infrastructure as a general idea, but specifically evacuation as it relates to infrastructure. And I'm looking through the document, and I'm not sure that I'm getting a clear picture of that in the document from a policy perspective. In the resilience and recovery section, I see RR 1.1 talks about upgrading utilities, stormwater, et cetera, to better withstand natural hazards. I don't see anything specific in the transportation section about keeping evacuation routes in mind. From a policy perspective, I think if it's in there, it could be brought forward more and or be included in a more clear way for current and future council members to keep that in mind, and developers, et cetera, as well, because we do not need any more specifically one way in out neighborhoods. And then also as we build out our road system to accommodate any potential sequential growth, I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as well. So that was one of the things that stood out to me in addition to what my council members already mentioned.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Councilmember Fee.
Yeah, I will just echo what my other counselors have mentioned. I want to first thank staff for an incredibly well-written document. It's organized in such a useful manner. It's helpful because it simplifies getting the information that we want at any given point. And I understand that it's a very high-level, overarching document also that doesn't give specifics on almost anything, which is good because that leaves it open for discussion in all these different areas for what we could or should do in the future, because things will change. It's not always going to be the same city that it is today. Or the same situations. So I like that it's open for interpretation and we can alter it at any time and make amendments or changes that we think should be in it. But what it is right now, I think is a grand improvement over what we've had. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna, oh, do we have, did you? Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
I don't mind going after you.
No, it's all right. I'm sorry about that.
You usually like to be the last person to speak, so I was going to give you that courtesy, but I'm happy to be.
Go ahead, sorry.
So, thank you. We're all like saying a lot of the same things. And I think that tells you actually what a good job you guys have really done. And this is definitely, just by reading through it, I think the community members' involvement, which I'm really thankful for, both ends of the spectrum, I might add. That's how we find a good community balance. If we don't have all of those voices participating and every one of us listening to all of them, I don't think we can get where we go. And you guys have really stepped up and done a lot of that. And this rewrite is such an improvement over what we started with. So thank you. I've always, for the nearly 30 years I've lived here, comprehensive plans seemed meh, you know, like, are they really influencing stuff? And, you know, do I hear developers say, oh, this is great. Like I kind of have an understanding of what this community is looking for. And in the past, I would have said no. This is closer to what we hear our residents talking about. And Councilmember Dickinson made a really good point that, you know, we've all recently spending a lot of time with community members, getting elected, working on the housing plan. I think the comprehensive plan is great. It's a big, broad overview. There's a lot of talk about the volume, how many, what's it going to look like. We worked hard and there was a lot of community input on the housing plan. And I hope that actually continues to evolve and refine through the years. I wouldn't like a 2024 document to stay stagnant on housing. I agree with Councilmember Cooperman. I think updating and working on our inclusionary housing policy, I brought this up nearly 2 years ago, that I think it's far too difficult for a lot of developers to comply and work with. We find them not doing it or choosing not to do projects at all because it doesn't pencil out with inclusionary housing. We need to make that easier. That's a pretty clear message that we are that we're hearing from our residents, that's an important value to them. What I want to make sure that people understand, at least I listen to all of you say, is we don't want a 40% population growth. I can sit here and tell you, I don't think a 40% population growth is good for Louisville. I don't hear that from most of the people I speak to, and I don't personally believe that. But I do think we have to create amazing opportunities for development. That's what this big comprehensive plan does. It does not mean that every single thing on here, the way that it's laid out, will be fulfilled this way. And this just says, you know, we're open. We're open to you coming to the council with ideas. And every couple of years, you're going to get some new council, which will reflect more of the community's interests and what they would like to see. And I hope that we continue to have, you know, amazing staff and, you know, thoughtful residents that are willing to come forward and help guide those decisions as developers look at these opportunities and feel where those opportunities can be best realized. Who knows? Maybe one really amazing thing goes in Centennial Valley and it's like, okay, that's awesome. You know, but this just, I think, allows for that. And I'm excited about that. Again, you know, living here for a long time, I remember seeing lots of ideas. I know that Councilmember Fahey does. We had some senior projects, which I will, you know, I advocate for heavily, some additional housing specifically for seniors in Louisville, or people who want to be seniors in Louisville. And it was kind of shot down, and it was in the Centennial Valley area. And I probably Chris remembers it as well. And it was a shame because I think about that now and think about, oh my gosh, how many single family homes for young families might have been opened up by that opportunity. People who wanted to downsize. And now up around Harper Lake and some other places where we see a population decline. It's not because Louisville's not awesome and people leave. People who had 2 or 3 kids, their kids are now grown and moved. So they're not selling their house and there's not a new family coming in that has 2 kids. So of course our population is going to go down as those children are part of the census and the count don't come back to the community. So we'd like to be able to see that opportunity as well. I have some young people that I know, a young couple, 21, just got an apartment together. They're so excited, not married, but you know, who knows what's in their future? They're excited to be in Louisville. They love it. And I keep thinking this kind of an opportunity for development, they might be 30-year-olds who find a way to live in Louisville. And these are not people who have on a career path for like highly affluent careers. These are regular working people that I very much relate to. And one's an accountant, so I very much relate. That's what I started doing when I first moved to Louisville. And I just feel like this will help. The affordability issue, I think we need to be very careful that we are using a lowercase a. And I think that we need to be thoughtful and focused, that we do have other documents that we use with more specificity, like the housing plan. Like when it comes to trails, it's the pros plan. When it comes to specifics on how we use or maintain or care for our open space, it's also going to be part of the pros plan. And I like this as a big thing. I wanted to thank Councilmember Hamilton for touching on the evacuation issue. I'm going to bring it up again just because I think it is so critical. Tomorrow night at the Ward 2 meeting, that's obviously something that's going to be coming up because we're going to be discussing via Appia. You heard a resident here tonight talk about the difficulty of leaving their community, which I happen to know quite well, having lived in it for the last nearly 30 years, and the difficulty getting onto via Appia, turning. That's traffic. That's the patterns. That's what we've done when we modify roadways. And so we need to be there. I would like to see there be some concentration or some emphasis put in this comprehensive plan that talks about that, just so that when developers are looking at this, they understand that that's something that they have to consider when coming to us. I like the idea of no one-way ins and outs. They have to be poised in such a way that people can get in and out of the community, especially when we're talking about putting development so near to the open spaces and what may very well be part of the upcoming WUI mapping. So I'm just looking at my notes, seeing if there's anything else, since I will only speak once apparently. Okay. Yeah. Again, I just want to thank everyone. The thoughtful comments in our community, about reasonably paced growth. And I cannot stress enough that I agree with a lot of this. I agree with a lot of your statements. And it has to be thoughtful. We must be intentional, but this is also required. We've got to create opportunity. There won't be any good, interesting possibilities for the future of Louisville if we don't open it up. And this comprehensive plan does it. Again, kudos to staff for making it clear enough, although exactly it's not like an evening read, it's a multiple evening read, that it's understandable in the direction that we're headed. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thanks. First of all, I'll add my kudos to the staff and to the community and to council and the various boards, particularly the Planning Commission, which has done fabulous work on this, and the folks who have are sort of supportive of this plan as it is, and those who have, I think, put it into the crucible and have helped to put it through the fire of, that's probably an unfortunate use of words there, but who have really tested it, because that's a really important thing for us to be doing. And I'll say first, I can't think of anything that other council members have said that I disagree with. I think all of them have said a variety of different things and have pointed out different pieces of it. And I hesitate to, go through them, tick them off, and say I agree, because that's I think people have done that quite well. I do want to say a few things. One, I'm I guess the only person on council who is here for any part of the last comp plan discussion. And even I was only there for the tail end of it. That is the McCaslin and South Boulder small area plans. I think they were what they were at the time. I wasn't especially pleased with some aspects of them at all. But I also recognize that Louisville was a bit different then. The conditions were different then. The public wasn't in a place where the public is now. And so when we were going through that, I think it reflected what the community was looking for then. But I would say now we've got an awful lot of changes, and we've got one of the things that I've noticed about that is, one, in the last comp plan, there was this focus on the people here in Louisville already. There was very much pressure not to think about people outside of Louisville. It was very focused on that. And it did strike me as somewhat ironic that we're trying to plan for future. People are going to pass away. There's going to be turnover, and we weren't thinking about them. We weren't thinking about, well, who might like to be here? Who might we want to attract to Louisville? That was not the focus then. And there was an absolute disinterest in, at least in the final project, in residential growth, which I think was a bit of a missed opportunity. And we're paying for that now a bit. We didn't have quite the crisis that we did then. We didn't have housing prices that were what they were then. We had plenty of kids in schools, and we don't have that now. And we have high prices and all of that. And the housing study is what it is. But I wanted to say all that because we are in a different place. And you know, there's so many things that have happened in this city, and I don't have to tell you what they are. You know, and there were things we did in the last comp plan just as a structural matter that I didn't really like, and I spoke very strongly. I remember one of them was not to use special review use on the South Boulder, in the South Boulder area plan. Literally that kind of granular thing. It's in there if you look at it. I thought it was ridiculous then. I think it's ridiculous now. And I think it's one of those things that we have in this current draft. We have largely taken out that kind of granularity and have focused on policies that we need here. I want to speak to one comment, which was a comment about we haven't really focused on the numbers of how many new people and what the growth limits might be. Well, why? Because state law prohibits us from setting a cap. Can't do that. Period. It's that simple. That doesn't mean we don't think about growth. We must, but it means we can't sit there and say, no, we do not want to grow above a certain level. Will we be proud of this plan in 5 years, in 10? I think we're on the road to that. I think we're pretty close to that in my point of view. I do want to speak to a couple of other pieces, and then I'll kind of move us on, I think. On affordable housing, I support what council members Dickinson and Cooperman have said on that. I worked on the 12% countywide goal. That was something that came at some cost before. It was a hard slog to get there. We have, if not a strict legal requirement to get there, a moral commitment and agreement with other communities in our county to get there. And so I think that's really important. I think it's also important that we provide incentives to help us get there. Density bonuses, there's a variety of ways we can do that. We don't have to talk about those. We don't have to talk about them necessarily in the plan, but I think we can get there without necessarily adding to our inclusive housing provision. We'll just have to, that's something in the future we can deal with. I think that we really received some important signaling from the community about affordable housing a couple of months ago in the election. I think this community, one, soundly rejected the idea that we're not going to have any new residential growth. The community is supportive of residential growth. The community is also, and Councilmember Dickinson has said this in the past, overwhelmingly supported Proposition 123 in the past. And that was clearly an affordable with a capital A provision. That's also important. So I think we do need a stronger statement in the plan about that. I think we need to keep our nerve. I think the one thing I did learn from the opposition in the 300-301 discussion was very important, was the concern that we're just going to end up with a bunch of incredibly expensive homes. It's not going to result in any new affordable housing. It's going to result in more of the same. It is our commitment, I think, and our duty not to let it end up that way. That is absolutely not my view with what the people of Louisville want. And I think it was a gauntlet thrown down by the people who opposed that we should be thinking about. We don't want that. We said we didn't want it. We said we wanted the some residential growth, smart residential growth, but also affordable housing that's real. So I think that's important. I agree about the evacuation issues and the preparedness issues. This is an important thing to incorporate and really make a strong statement about. So those are my comments generally. I hope I think the other thing is on the questions that I don't see them on the screen again, but the questions that were asked by staff. Bear with me a minute. You're not going to help me there, are you? Just a second. Hold on for a second, because there they are. There they are. Is the draft comp plan clear and usable as a long-term policy guide? I've talked about the things where I think the clarity could be improved. I think others have too. So I think generally, yes, with the Goodhue ditch comment is good. And I think it's about the right level of specificity, which I think is good. Does the future land use framework appropriately direct potential change to the right locations? Absolutely. I think the opportunity levels are or the opportunity areas are the opportunity areas. I'm delighted with the way that has come out. Are there major policy gaps or omissions in the draft plan that should be addressed? I think we have talked about a few of those. I think by and large, what I hear from our council, if I could sort of pull back, is that we have a lot of agreement, some nuance changes, but I have not heard anybody say, I agree with everything but what Judy said about this, or what Barbara said about this, or what Dietrich said. Different levels of passion about each of those kinds of things. But that said, I think if staff is willing to incorporate those issues and those kind of changes, and frankly, I think all of them, I think that's a good thing. Now, my only question is, one, does anybody else have anything to say about sort of that quick summary? And two, is staff got enough specificity, or are you confused or lack direction?
No, I think this is great input. Jeff may have some questions, but I feel like this is great input, and I think we get a sense of what amendments we would be making. For clarity, I think the public open house is coming up really quickly, and so the intent is that they will see this draft. It doesn't mean we're ignoring your comments. We will be making all of your edits for the adoption draft, and then giving you all the public feedback that comes through the public input meeting, so that you can have further consideration of that. But this draft would go to the public. We just wanted to make sure that you were comfortable.
Understood. Council members, anything to add? Yes. Councilmember Hefner and then Councilmember Cooperman.
For me, it would be helpful if we could ask Jeff to just read a list of what he has, just to make sure. A lot of people talked about a lot of things, and I just want to make sure I know what they all are.
Okay, so this may not be great organization of the comments, but Goodhue ditch, footnoting that is conceptual, sort of softening in that a bit was a comment. Regarding housing affordability, I guess the overarching comment or theme was that strengthening that, like it's throughout the document, the affordable housing policies, but I guess what I heard at least was make it more explicit that we want to see affordable housing with projects that come in where that lives. I'm not sure exactly yet, but I think that there's opportunities to strengthen it so it's a nod to a future council or decision maker, so that it's clear when they open the document that that's a priority. The Old Town overlay being more explicitly acknowledged in the plan. I don't know that there wasn't a lot of group discussion about that, but I think that is something that we as staff think is appropriate too, to acknowledge the uniqueness of that area. let's see, more explicitly call out the inclusionary housing ordinance as an action item. I think we can definitely do that. The evacuation routes was also a key issue to address, which I think could be an additional strategy that we or goal, I'm not sure yet, but to more explicitly state it in the transportation element to reinforce that as a priority. Those are the ones I had logged. I'm not sure if you're missing.
I think one more area that we had was related to this concept of allowing duplexes in the RLD and RMX designations. And then just for one point of clarification, so there's something that that Tamara's brought up, and I've also heard other folks bring up related to the table in the plan, the future estimated residential growth maximum, and they're taking exception to the term maximum because it is a projection based upon taking the different land uses, applying my understanding, the midpoint of the density, and then using factors of that to calculate what the potential growth could be in those specific areas. And so one recommendation would be to remove that word maximum and just have projection. Because there's a methodology that's attached in the appendix that explains how the projection was determined. And so just remove that argument that this is it doesn't represent maximum of what could occur theoretically, but it's a projection based upon a methodology that's included in the plan.
And then I just wanted to add one clarification is the RLD land use category does allow duplexes. So I think there's a comment about the specificity of the density. So I think there might be something we can do specifically there so it's not overly restrictive. So nobody's arguing that, well, this is a good project. It doesn't meet the maximum density standard. We wanted to be careful of that. We provided ranges just as a way so that people understand what it means. So we felt like it was good to have some density ranges. The code that we draft, our land development code, may or may not include these types of regulatory restrictions, but I think we could play around with that. But I just wanted to be clear, duplexes are an allowed use in that category.
Yeah, any comments on that? Yes.
So thank you. And I appreciate that because I think the fact that it has been brought up, I think identifies just the need maybe for the clarification that it is a viable option, if it isn't made clear. And I like the idea of figuring out a way to make the units per acre more of a recommendation versus a mandate.
Yeah, I'd maybe recommend adding some footnotes that these are conceptual to give an idea, but that they will that they're not meant to be an absolute governor or limitation, and it should be based on form and character of the neighborhoods. Some footnote like that.
Based on are any of those comments, I don't know, either a problem or you want to add to or embroider on? Good. Looks like some thumbs up. Yeah. I appreciate all of those comments. I think pulling back, it's really important for people to understand generally that, and I think this comes through, that there are a lot of decisions to be made after this, lots, based on, some of the documents that are going to get changed that were listed, the whole PUD process, and there's a whole bunch of ways in which things gradually get more specific. And this as a policy document, I think is much stronger than the previous documents. And I think it's the kind of thing that makes some hard choices and some choices that I think are informed, as a number of us has said, but Councilmember Dickinson said at the beginning, that are informed by recent experience talking to the public, recent experience talking, having public engagement on this, recent experience in doing the housing study. All of this stuff is just remarkably convergent, I think, on what's been reflected. Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Thanks. I had sort of held off on answering the questions explicitly because I thought we were going to do it in 2 stages.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and if you'd like another shot at that, I'm glad to do that. And I'm also, what I didn't do, and I probably should have, is to say, do you have any comments on one another's? I just didn't hear anybody say anything, but yeah. But go ahead.
Okay. So, regarding the first question, I think it's a very good draft to go forward for the public open house. I had a few thoughts about making it maybe clearer or more usable. So one of them would be, I think it'd be nice if, like, when you got to the opportunity areas, if there were like a zoomed in version of what the future land use map looks like for that opportunity area alone. And then it'd be nice, like, because then it would be next to the existing map, and it'd be a nice comparison. A little thing like, I don't know if I don't know if you can show parking on the existing, like at least like large scale parking. I thought would be nice to show on the existing maps. Just a little thing. Sorry, what else? Another thing I was wondering about, when you get to the opportunity areas, like each of them has like an overarching goal. I was wondering about fleshing out a little bit more like our vision for that opportunity area, in like a paragraph, essentially. I think that might be helpful. Another thing that might make it easier to work with, when you first present the future land use map, it has the legend with the place types. But then the place types aren't defined for like a couple pages later. So if the table with the place types could be closer to the land use map, I think that would make it much more easier to read. And then, sorry, maybe the last one would be, I actually think it would be nice to take the vision and values and put those at the very beginning of the plan, because they're referenced in what's at the very beginning of the plan right now, but they don't come till a few pages later. And I think it'd be nice just to start out like, this is the community's vision, these are our values, and then go into, okay, this is our comprehensive plan, this is what it's about. I don't know, just as a suggestion. In terms of the second question, I don't really have much to say. I think generally speaking, yes, we're directing change in the right locations. There are a couple little things I'd like to think about more, but I'm okay right now. And then for the last question about policy gaps or omissions, one I wanted to bring up, and there was one public comment that we got a letter about. I do feel like we're not talking about transit enough in the plan. There's a good amount, I feel like now, about rail, but there's not very much about expansion of, or I think not enough about expansion of bus transit, essentially. And I wouldn't mind seeing something like, we would love to see, like, if we could get that going, like, we would love to see these things connected by transit. And there are a few things called out, but like, it doesn't call out Monarch, it doesn't call out the CTC, it doesn't really call out the Centennial Valley. So I would love to see a little bit more around transit, and what the community would like to see for transit. And let's see, do I have anything else? And then maybe just one other thing. So, I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but so we've indicated, right, on the future land use map, what kinds of things we'd like to see in what places. And right, as has been emphasized, those are just aspirations, right? Or we don't know what's going to actually happen. Will we have as much population growth as those projections? We don't know. And so, what I'm interested in is like, let's just suppose that we have less growth than maybe we're projecting or slower growth than we're projecting. I think it would be better if we did infill development first and we held off on some of the fringes, because maybe they would never be developed. So it's a little bit like sort of an anti-sprawl kind of idea, but on a small scale. And I would be interested in having some kind of statement around that idea. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So I think, there's a lot of specific things there, and I want to make sure that we understand if there's kind of a council consensus on these. So I don't know, that was a lot, and I don't know if like every council member is going to have like similar specific comments. They might be hard to track. I don't know if you want to take them one at a time to see if there's consensus on those changes.
How do folks feel about the changes that we just heard from Josh? Go ahead, Councilmember Hafner.
I guess I'm happy to go through them one at a time and talk about them, but I think what I would say is that to the extent staff finds them sort of helpful and persuasive and wants to incorporate them, there wasn't anything that I felt I strongly object to, but I also think there's sort of limited runway left to do this, and I'm mindful of all the work that's already gone into it. So I think that's maybe how I would approach it, but certainly happy to hear from others.
Others? Councilmember Dickinson?
Yeah, I mostly agree with Dietrich. I think where you heard stuff that's, oh yeah, it's easy. That's an easy change, edit, or consider it, not do it because it becomes harder. But I don't know that there was a major policy shift anywhere in there that's going to drastically change the direction that we're trying to put in there. So I don't think you got direction from Cooperman or the seven of us to do anything that would drastically change it or take a bunch more time. But I think anything that he mentioned that is an easy shift was all palatable for me, and none of it rose to the level of like crucial for me either. So that's fair. It's like if you're just getting other people's pulse on it.
Any others? Yeah.
I actually particularly agree with and like the idea of moving that table closer to the maps. The description of that was very difficult. That was probably the only thing that was always kept going up and down, back and forth. So that I agree. That would make it a little bit simpler, maybe a little bit easier. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, if there's some simple things, it's not like a lot of the. I think a lot of the ideas were good, Josh. I think wordsmithing and trying to rewrite a lot of it, if there's like specific, like if you looked through and you're like, oh, like this would be a great way to just throw this in here to comment on additional RTD transit or something, or like the city of Louisville's open to micro transit to help, then maybe, and then I would say like send that to the city manager and float it. But yeah, if there's something easy for us to put in there, it all sounded like right on track, just more detailed.
Yeah, I think that the transit strategies make a lot, that's a policy item, makes a lot of sense. And I think the other cleanup items, if they make sense, we can do them. I just didn't, if any of them become like big formatting issues, I just want to see how strongly everybody felt about it.
Yeah, I think the one that I would like to have vetted out more is that if we have slower growth than what we're projecting, that it'd be better to have infill development occur first rather than develop in the fringes. That including that type of statement can be used for and against projects in the future. And so that is one I would really want clear direction as to what council wants in there. And then in terms of showing parking on the existing map, I guess my question would be why? What benefit does it serve? And because from a GIS perspective, the level of scale that we have, and I know you're talking about zooming in on the opportunity areas, to show, when you're trying to overlay aerial photos with color designations, it's not going to show up well. So then it's really adding like an existing aerial map. And I guess my question would be, what's the benefit of that versus, you have the plan in front of you, you can go into Google Maps and zoom and see where that's at. But the one that I really would like to have more direction is the last one that was noted.
Others about that, how about that point?
So I love the idea of the infill. We've all been talking about this, and I think every one of us is, or I won't all speak. I'm definitely also in agreement. I think infill ideas are fantastic. I think encouraging them over other development may not be the right phrasing, but maybe instead just that. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not the wordsmith you guys are actually are, but just something about that we do support it, not so much we support it over something. You know what I mean? It is a supported thing that we would like to say.
Yeah, so I think, I think what we're trying to capture here with the land use plan and the policies is flexibility. Because I think what we're realizing is that you need market feasibility to attract development. And so that's a really important aspect. So the more barriers you put up, the less likely you're going to get development. I do think, like, we don't talk about this a lot, but we're part of this super IGA with the county where we created growth boundaries, and part of that concept was to try to put new development in designated urban areas. So the areas we are looking are the designated urban areas in exchange for preserving those. So if you don't do that, that's where we start to see these 25 plus mile commutes increasing, and 10-mile plus commutes increasing by almost 10% in a decade, and all of these things, this job to housing balance, because there's no, because the next place you can develop, because we have these great open space buffers. So I think that if we're already doing it in a way, if that makes sense, and focusing in the opportunity areas.
Other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I just, as an example, if you look at the Centennial Valley, right, and you look at the lots that are vacant there, right, some of those are interior and some of those are exterior, right, and those are all private property and they could all be developed, but my personal preference would be you develop the interior ones first and you wait to develop the exterior ones, because who knows what's going to happen to them. And some of those are also identified as potential open space acquisitions, right? Whereas the interior ones are not. So it's, I'm not trying to say that I don't want to go along with that IGA. I'm just saying I don't know, having that, yeah, like a micro kind of anti-sprawl, but not that you're disallowing, you're prioritizing or favoring the infill.
Yeah, I think that conceptually makes sense, but I would just see if council wants us to be that specific or kind of go for market supported within the development areas.
I have a pretty strong feeling about that. I do not want to do that. I mean, I think it's important to encourage infill, generally, but I worry that the more prescriptive we are, I mean, one of the things that sort of bothers me about that is we really are decreasing the amount of flexibility. We are, I mean, especially the order of development. I think that's going to kill certain kinds of things that we really want if we're saying, oh, just these properties need to move first, because there may be wonderful opportunities to do certain kinds of housing. And I just would hate to put the damper on that because we wanted to dictate it. And I'm not sure that I get the concept. It's a question of flexibility. I also, I mean, I have sort of some concern about how that is going to affect kind of the market value of those properties. I mean, it's a very, if you say you want those interior properties to be developed first, there's going to be, some value to that. The outlying properties I think doing a non-market effect that may not really be appropriate for a government to do. But that's my thought. Yeah, Councilmember Hamilton.
I agree. This feels like a bigger policy shift as we near the finish line. I wonder if this concept, though, couldn't be pulled over into, I think, Jeff, you had like land dedication as one of the things that we're gonna look at in the near term. Was that right, Rob?
It is, but I think they're very different issues. So there's new legal requirements about public land dedications. And so we want to make sure that our public land dedication requirements are compliant and tuned to meet the legal requirements.
Okay,
Is really
got
what
it.
we're looking
I
at
was thinking
more
of
than
that as a potential opportunity to maybe address some of this concern of land in that area. But
Right.
sounds like
I think the city acquiring more open space is something we've done successfully over
Yeah.
time, but it's usually when it's, private property, we're looking at how can we purchase it rather than affecting it with land use policy. So I think, we might have some policies in here that we might want to strengthen about the city continuing to be aggressive about trying to purchase open space in appropriate areas to kind of extend those buffers and boundaries as we have resources to do so. So if we don't have strong policies on that, that's like a back way of not affecting someone's, land use rights with a comp policy, but just saying generally, and then open space board can continue to have their priority properties that we would look at.
Councilmember Hefner.
I was just gonna agree with you, Mayor, and I'm not sure there's that much air between what everyone's talking about. I think we all want to encourage infill. And unless I see Councilmember Cooperman vigorously shaking his head, maybe we can settle on it's something we want to encourage and let staff figure out the right way to say that.
Anyone else on that particular issue? City manager, are you comfortable that we have fleshed that out enough for?
I'm looking at Rob and Jeff.
Yeah, I think so. I think we have a comment to consider something around infill development generally, how important that is to the city for infill. I don't know if that's enough. I think that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
I do think we can strengthen a more explicit statement without prioritizing one or the other, so support infill development more explicitly. And maybe a nod to because services and infrastructure are already there, which is what you're talking about, like contiguous versus on the edge, we can fix the pipes and roads. I think we can do that without prioritizing one over the other. Let's look at it.
Right. I think open space acquisition near existing open space is always a logical priority. So we could even have a policy like that without specifying, getting overly specific if we don't have that already.
Okay. Councilmember Hefner, I think wanted.
I was just giving you a hard time. I don't have anything else to say on the questions.
I mean, we started kind of a trend. There were in the middle, and it wasn't fair to the people who went early.
I think the draft plan is outstanding, and I can't wait to see it again in its final form. And it does so many wonderful things, and I'm proud to be here.
Did you want to split it up between the three, or are you good?
No, sir.
Okay. Does anyone else want to speak to the three? I don't mean to discourage people.
I just had a random thought, and I apologize if it is in here or not in here. But I'm just curious, is Sundance mentioned in our comprehensive plan, which might seem ridiculous, but like, first of all, is it mentioned at all whatsoever? No. Because for the next 10 years, it is going to change Boulder County in a big way for a couple weeks or a month a year. Let's like big, like maybe negative, maybe incredibly positive, but having nothing in our like 10-year plan about what we're doing about an enormous event that brings 100,000 people to our town for 2 weeks or to our area for 2 weeks is like, I mean, to have nothing about that So I am not telling you what to put in there. I'm not saying it even needs to be in there, but just one of those like, I think I said to you the other day, Rob, one of the hardest things about this process is what's omitted. Well, I don't know what isn't in here. Infinite things aren't in here, but that was one that just occurred to me. And like, well, I think that's going to be a really big story over the next 10 years, the tourism to this area. And we have policies around it. We have ordinances around it. We have so many things. So for it to not even be mentioned anywhere, maybe it just slips in somewhere around tourism and infrastructure around tourism. Again, transportation, lodging, like it's going to hit a lot of things. Temporary taxes, lodging taxes, all these things that it will potentially affect.
I think we could find a logical place for a strategy about how to leverage the Sundance Festival for economic vitality for the city.
Yeah, don't go crazy. Control F, Sundance exists.
Now, adjacent to that, there's opportunities in Sundance and so forth relating to the arts. I don't know. I don't want to get too specific, but I think there's certainly some community sentiment on trying to leverage, potentially some land uses that are of some assistance to economic vitality, the Sundance, and, as a very general matter, what I have in mind, which is performing arts center, or an arts culture center. But I think that I don't want to get too specific in here. But I think what Caleb has raised is just generally thinking about that is a good idea. And that kind of dovetails with Sundance. But again, don't want to derail that, but it may be useful to include something relating to it. Does anybody have any thought about that? About what Caleb said or what? Anybody? Okay. All right. Yes. Councilmember Koopman.
Just one little question. Could staff give us a sense for what the open house will look like?
Yeah, so it is more as informational at this stage with opportunities for input, but it'll be typical open house in the sense that there'll be display boards highlighting the key elements of the plan. There'll be drafts of the plan available for deeper dive review. We'll have a blow up of the future land use map, so there'll be an opportunity to probably put sticky notes and make comments specifically on that map. Same thing possibly on the transportation map. I'm not sure. But it is more informational, but there is space for general comments. We're not going to be asking like really specific like policy comments on things that have already been discussed. So yeah, it'll be fun too. There'll be refreshments, and it's at the Simon on Main Street. So we thought we would mix it up a little bit and keep it downtown. Yeah.
I'm absolutely looking forward to Caleb being part of that because he is the designated fun guy on the council. Oh, sorry. I think we shouldn't go around and decide that because it looks like there is competition for that spot. But anyway, so it is a time check. It's 8:30. I don't know whether anybody else has any thoughts on council or staff. Yes, council member.
I just wanted to make a clarifying point. When we tell people that the open house is at the Simon, I understand there's a lot of people who are do a lot more in downtown who actually know what the Simon is, and that we should give the address. I think it is actually in the piece that went out. It's this really amazing, what is it? South and Main, is it the intersection? Is that what it is? The corner of South and Main, white building, right? Across from the the giant Coca-Cola sign. So it's, easy to find. And because I have to tell you, up until early 25, I did not know what the Simon was. And I got invited to something. I'm like, what is that? never been there, never been to a wedding at that. So I just thought I would clarify because I think I heard somebody else say, where is that? And so that's where it is. Thank you. South and Main.
Good point. And I do look forward to hearing what the public has to say about all of this. It'll be, and I mean, certainly by the draft that's going to go to them, but I mean, there probably will be comments about things that have been stated. Any other comments? All right. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, guys.